Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you, and on this video I will be talking about the season finale of 1899. The episode is called The Key. Full spoilers from the start of this review, and this was a really strong, satisfying season finale, which also does a great job of setting up season 2, so a nice little hook for that at the end. Something else into the mix, another idea of what might be going on, and it does put this idea out there, then Henry might not be the villain after all. Then it throws some shade on Marina and on Daniel maybe, and gets more and more, and they keep putting this argument out there in a very convincing, strong way. Then you sort of do question it. You do wonder if actually there is another twist in this thing, and like it's going to turn out then Marina maybe isn't quite as innocent, finding this bug-like creature he's been using to open doors. And it's given a name. It's like Ancient Alfred or something, which I'm guessing is going to be like a real life bug or something, or based on something. And they do this like mother-daughter thing where he wants to keep it, but Marina says, you've got to let it go. You've got to let it go free, live its life. And she uses that as like an analogy for how one day she'll have to let Elliot go, and she'll have to let him live his own life and be his own person. So she uses that as an analogy, which works in the scene, but also it sort of connects to some of the themes of the show too, and the fact that they've now found each other again, that awoken, and you have the line, me and your father will always be with you, which again is quite telling. But he then awakes back in the asylum with Henry, and Henry once again repeats the message, your mother is the only one who can save us. And it's that sort of repetition throughout the episode where he's constantly dropping these lines. And as the episode goes on, he starts to expand on it a bit more. One thing I'll say is that he does monologue a lot in this episode, Henry, and I think he overdoes it a little bit if there's a complaint, but I enjoyed the scenes because that actor is really good and he's very good at playing villainous type thing. But throughout the episode, he's trying to convince Elliot that like he's more of a victim, like he's been caught up in this world, and that the mother giving him the key and them getting the code is the only way to stop it altogether. Then they're as trapped as everyone else, which actually Daniel confirms at the end. Not that it justifies some of Henry's actions. He's still been very villainous at times. But then his parents built the insane asylum, and that they're responsible for this whole experiment because He says to him, do you think that's really your mother in that chair? It's actually you. He gives him a memory. He says this is the truth. And the memory is like in the chair, and Mina and Daniel talking about him and debating what's the best thing to do. And they seem to be having this idea that they felt it was the best thing to keep him from the truth, to protect him almost. But then they are the ones responsible for what's happening. And Elliot doesn't buy this. He doesn't buy that he's been left behind by his parents. He still thinks Henry's did all this, created all this, and believes the narrative he's been given. He's like, no, you've implanted a false memory. But as the episode goes on, like he does start to break Elliot. He starts becoming more and more convinced. They capture Mina. They get her in the chair and they inject her, and Elliot does it, so he's been convinced at this point then his mother actually did this and that she's responsible. So Mina pops up on X ship and she tells him the truth and about Elliot and their relationship to her. They talk to the others and they start to explain, about the simulation. I'm buying it, especially Mrs. Wilson. Once again, even though to a certain extent, she's become a little bit more sympathetic, Mrs. Wilson. She still is one of those characters who has a villainous air to her, but she's not buying it and questions it. And the bit I really like is when Mina asks her, do you remember boarding this ship, or how you boarded the ship? And she has this reply, it's like, well, of course I do. But then she pauses, and you can tell she can't remember it because she doesn't say anything. And the rest start to question it. But the bit that kind of confirms that Mrs. Wilson is still pretty shady and a bit of a villain is then she manipulates me into Mina's the enemy and that they should get off the ship and that they can't trust her. Tommy is having that idea anyway, like she's starting to get frustrated and rebel. But when you watch the scene, you can definitely tell Mrs. Wilson's influence. Even though she's sort of treated her like a piece of shit for a lot of the series, she does at that moment come to her and at least pretend to be on her level and looking out for her. But I sort of saw the manipulation in the scene. They all decide then they want to do something and get off the ship. None of them are really buying into the simulation argument. And I like that because although weird shit has been going on the ship, it probably would still be a jump to believe that it was all a simulation. So once again, you get a really frantic, tense episode with like the different characters trying to get off the ship. I really like the infrared style visuals, and once again you get them sort of paired off, but you get this whole claustrophobic horror thing of the walls starting to close in, the ship starting to crumble because of all this like the black sort of stuff on the wall. And what we get like Daniel trying to basically hack into the mainframe of the simulation and override it. It really builds the stakes and the tension, and you feel this is like the big sort of simulation. But it gets to the point because maybe one complaint is that I felt Mina handed the key over to Henry a bit too easily. I think at that point she's just been persuaded that maybe things are doomed. She's there in the asylum, Daniel into his like memory. And Mina are like looking to get back to the asylum, and they sort of end up back in Daniel's memories. And they just from the past, but it's from his point of view. And another idea I like is when Mina tells the rest of the characters, then it's about every one of us. It's not just about me. Play it so perfectly where, because they've injected Mina, and so Henry and Elliot go back to the asylum and to like his office style thing. And he's got the pyramid and he opens up the slot and he puts the key in and nothing happens. And Henry works out, well, Daniel has hacked in, he's overthrown it. And what I like about this stuff is at first it makes it look like Daniel overriding it might be a bad thing for the rest, because all this random shit starts with like these sort of portal style things in the ship. Wow, and they're sort of separated. So Lin Lee and Mero are together, like they're shot out onto a land together. And I like that because they speak different languages. So as far as I know, they can't understand each other. So if they did like return to this in season 2, for example, for whatever reason, they could actually play on that. Then these characters have no way of communicating. Not through words anyway, not through language. Would like maybe for them to bring these characters back for season 2. The ending doesn't make it clear if they will, but that would be something good, because season 2, the way they set it up, then it's going to have a different feel, different location anyway. But that's just the thing I would like to see, because it would be fun to see different versions of these characters given different things to do. So, and if I had a prediction, I think they will do that, because it's maybe part of the point of this sort of show to experiment with those characters. Clements and Jerome, which is fitting, and they sort of have a moment together. Heavy stuff is with Lin Lee in that part. It appears to her in like this substance, because it returns to the scene of her being thrown into a basket. And like this other figure is like in the basket, and the basket's shaking, and she opens it up, and it's like it's got this substance on it. So I think it's meant to be Oleg, but it crossed my mind then it might be the girl who Lin Lee killed in the past and like left behind, took her life, because I thought it might be like just confronting her with that. But I assume it is meant to be Oleg, just because he went overboard and he was in the simulation, and then you've got this like black substance when they return to the ship as normal. Lee runs in, and the rest of them are there, and then Lee starts shouting, "Where's Oleg? Is Oleg here?" And they don't know what she's talking about, but she clearly believes that was Oleg, and that now that if things have been reversed and stopped, he might be still alive. And that's not confirmed one way or the other. It's not confirmed that now that the simulation has stopped, then everybody who was killed is saved. They're brought back to life. I think that's probably true, but it's never confirmed one way or the other. So, yeah, we build to this ending. Daniel hacks into the mainframe. Things have been stopped. And then we go back to Daniel's place, the place we've seen him and Elliot in the past. And him and Mina post the simulation being stopped. And we find out then he built this room. Him and... I think he said him and Mina, like, we built this room as a safe space sort of thing, which makes sense because it's where he had Elliot stay back in another episode. This is a really nicely played, intimate scene. Good performances from the two actors. I really like the shading of the scene and the mood to it. Underplayed and intimate, as I said. Couple of nice details, because Mina still doesn't really remember everything, but she is obviously starting to be convinced of what Daniel is telling her, and the big factor is she now has a wedding ring on her finger. Daniel has changed what the key is, changed it to Mina's wedding ring, which is just perfect. This twist, because he explains brother who built the simulations, and that he's responsible for all this, because he does say that Henry is like innocent, a bit like us. He's just trapped in the whole thing and trying, which does make sense, because the more he kept trying to push that, it's like only your mother can end this. Pyramid thing didn't work, and he figured out what Dad then says, "Oh, we're all trapped here forever now." But yeah, he says your brother did it, and your brother is now trapped trying to fix the simulation, to fix the whole thing, figure it out. So that gives us a nice meaty hook for season 2, because he tells Mina, your brother, so you need to go into like another simulation and fix it, solve the problem, and find your brother. It's extra knowledge, so she's not just going into a situation blind where she doesn't quite feel herself and she can't remember things. So that's a good thing to play with. Then she does now have this knowledge and can approach the simulation in a very different way. About the brother and exactly what had happened to him, and once again, it's always possible that Daniel isn't being 100% truthful, but because we've now found out that like Henry isn't this grand creator or isn't the one behind all this, it does make some sense, and it could be like her brother. Of the episode, sets up next season, and it's so beautifully done, because you know she's going to be in a different location, but it's that one shot that actually shows you where exactly, because she wakes up in this ship type thing in this room. See that there's other characters there, other people who are like seem to be asleep, seem to be in these chambers. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I think they are gonna be the same characters, the same main characters, but it will be a different setup this time. They'll be different versions of themselves. But yeah, Mina is given her assignment on this bit of paper, and it repeats like that coffee line from the previous episode, the one that was printed over and over again in the book, which I really liked. And she's just given sort of her assignment, and she's given a list of how many people are on board, various things. And she actually looks outside, and they're in space. They're on a space station or spaceship, and that's the setup for next season. Then the next simulation is in space. Exciting stuff. They play Starman by Bowie, which is a great choice of music, and also the little touch of the ship being called the Prometheus as well. That's so perfect. That makes so much sense and is so great. But it's a perfect setup for season 2 and a great finale. This has been a fantastic first season, and I'm excited for season 2. And the thing about this type of show now that we've set up a season 2, and there will be a season 2 but in a different location, is actually, although it's a different setup, like a different simulation, you can add more mythology still, because you can draw back on things that happened in season 1 and maybe give a few more explanations on certain things. But that's the whole point about having this link to her brother, like still bringing that up and saying, well, he's actually the one behind all this, and he needs saving. So it means you can draw back on season 1 and just build mythology some more, which is some of the best stuff with a really good show like this, I think anyway. So I'm pumped for season 2. I can't wait to see what they do and what some of the mysteries and reveals are, and it'll just keep building, I think, and adding to what we've seen in this season. Very good first series. I'm a big fan. Probably one or two nitpicks. I'm not going to say it was perfect all the way through, but definitely one of the best things I've seen this year when it comes to TV or film. This really ticks so many boxes. And it was so great, such great characters and drama to go along with the more fantastical sci-fi complex ideas. But as I said back in the first review, it had that good balance of being really experimental and posing riddles, but also making it more interesting and accessible to follow, where you wanted to get the answers. And you always felt that these writers knew what they were doing in that sense. It never felt like they were just throwing ideas out there, or they didn't have an end game, or they didn't have answers. It always felt like they knew what they were doing, and that they continue to pose questions, but they continue to pose interesting questions, and questions that there were sort of answers out there. And sometimes you don't get all the answers, and that's the beauty of this sort of show, because I think it would feel a bit forced or unsatisfying if you did. But it's sort of that lost thing where I feel like they gave you enough of the answers, but then still left certain questions hanging there. And obviously we don't yet know what season 2 will bring, so we may still get some answers in that. But they definitely got the right balance, and I was into the whole thing pretty much all the way. So that's my review of the finale of 1899. Really good stuff, and it's definitely going to figure quite high on my top 10 for the year. So that's probably a video I'll do around about end of December, maybe early January. But thanks for watching or listening. Let me know your thoughts of this finale in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And I'll see you guys again soon. Take care. Goodbye.